never thought the worst day of my life would have a sequel. Losing my only son had already hollowed out a part of me that could never be filled again. But what shattered me wasn't just the loss of Henry. It was what followed. Exactly 7 days after his funeral, I sat on the edge of the armchair he used to fall asleep in on quiet Sunday afternoons, clutching his gray cardigan to my chest, still heavy with the scent of his cologne. The flowers from his service were still alive, their sweet perfume mixing with the echo of memories that clung to every surface of that house. And then she said it. "Mara, we need to talk," said Tessa, my daughter-in-law. Her tone wasn't soft, not the way she spoke during the eulogy or in front of the neighbors. No, this was sharper. Cold. The version of her I'd always suspected existed behind the polite smiles. I looked up, expecting her to maybe ask about Henry's things or the children. Maybe we'd talk about how they were coping. Maybe we'd cry together. But she didn't sit down. She stood tall, manicured nails tapping against the doorframe, designer blouse tucked into jeans that cost more than what I spent on groceries in a month. I had to blink to fully understand what she said next. "I've been thinking about the house situation," she started. "With Henry gone, things need to change." A weight settled in my chest. I gripped the cardigan tighter. What do you mean?" Her voice was so steady. Too steady. "The kids and I need space to grieve properly. And honestly, having you here is just too much right now." I stared at her. "Too much? You're always crying. Always touching his things. Always talking about him like he's still here. That's not healthy for the children." I couldn't speak. My fingers clutched the fabric he wore just weeks ago, his favorite Sunday cardigan. I opened my mouth, but all that came out was a whisper. "Tessa, this is my home too. Henry wanted me here. We talked about it before he got sick." She laughed. Not kindly. "Henry said a lot of things when he was doped up on meds. The fact is, this house belongs to me now. And I need you to pack your things." It was like my chest had been struck. I couldn't breathe. I barely heard what she said next. "Don't be dramatic, Mara. You're a grown woman. Learn to manage on your own. Henry always said you were stronger than you acted." I turned to look at her, still hoping this was some kind of miscommunication, a mistake in wording. But she was smoothing her blonde hair in the hallway mirror, barely looking at me. "You'll figure something out. You always do." I tried not to cry. I really did. But I thought about the tiny savings Henry had helped me build. Barely enough to rent a closet, much less a place near the children. This was my whole world. My life. My grandchildren were here. Henry was buried just 10 minutes away. And what about Zoe and Miles? I finally asked. "I help with their homework. I make dinner. I tuck them in." Tessa tilted her head. "Maybe it's time they learned independence. Henry babied them too much. And frankly, so do you." The cruelty wasn't just casual. It was deliberate. I felt my stomach turn as I looked at her. Her own children, dismissed like they were chores. "How long do I have?" I asked, holding my breath. "I'd like you gone by tomorrow evening. I have decorators coming to redo Henry's office. I don't want any awkwardness. Tomorrow." She wanted me out in 24 hours. After 5 years of giving up my own apartment to move in and help raise the kids while she jetted around for work. "Where do you expect me to go?" I asked. "I need time to figure things out." Her face didn't change. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Henry's gone. You're not my responsibility." Not her responsibility. That part sank deepest. After years of staying up with sick kids, packing school lunches, handling bedtime when she was too busy for anything but her phone. I nodded slowly, afraid my voice would crack. "I'll pack tonight." As I stood to leave the room, she added one more final cruelty. "And Mara? Please don't make a scene with the kids. They've had enough trauma." That night, I packed what little I still owned into the same suitcases I'd brought years ago. I had so little that was truly mine. Most of the furniture belonged to the house. I'd given away nearly everything after I moved in. I folded Henry's cardigan carefully, placed it between a photo of him with the kids on Christmas morning and a few paperbacks he used to read in bed. I left behind the old TV he got me, the reading chair he gave as a gift, the books we used to discuss on lazy Sunday mornings. I left everything that made that room feel like mine. But the hardest thing wasn't what I packed. It was the letter I wrote to Zoe and Miles. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old that their grandma is leaving without making their mother sound like the villain? How do you say goodbye without promising to come back, when you don't know if you ever will? In the end, I wrote, Grandma had to move to a new place. I love you both so much. Be good for Mommy. Love and hugs always. I taped it to their bathroom mirror so they'd find it in the morning. I couldn't say goodbye in person. I couldn't risk seeing the tears or hearing the questions. Tessa was right about one thing. Those kids didn't need to see me fall apart. Not after they'd already lost their father. At sunrise, I packed my car with everything I had left. The trunk barely shut. The back seat held a box of groceries I grabbed from the pantry. Crackers, peanut butter, bottled water. I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the house where I'd laughed, cried, and lived beside my son. Where his children, my only grandchildren, were still sleeping in their rooms, unaware that their constant was disappearing. I saw her in the window, Tessa, watching me with a coffee cup in hand. No emotion. Just watching, like she was making sure I didn't change my mind and ruin her clean start. I put the car in reverse and drove away from the only family I had left in the world. Nowhere to go. No plan. Just grief in the passenger seat and the cold knowledge that I was, in her eyes, disposable. 2 weeks. That's how long I lived in my car before the silence started to feel heavier than the cold at night. I parked behind an old 24-hour diner just outside of town. It was far enough from Tessa's neighborhood that I wouldn't bump into anyone I knew, but close enough that I could still drive by Zoe and Miles' school and watch them at recess from a distance. I didn't get out of the car. I just watched. Pathetic, maybe, but seeing them laugh and run around gave me something to hold on to. The first few days, I kept telling myself this was temporary. That I'd find a small room to rent or a cheap apartment soon. I applied to a few senior communities, but the waiting lists were months long, and the deposits were more than I had in my account. I looked at some apartments too, but most were in neighborhoods where I didn't feel safe, especially not at night and especially not alone. My life quickly turned into a strange kind of routine. Every morning at 6, when the diner opened, I'd go in to use the restroom. I'd wash my face, brush my teeth, and try to look normal. Then I'd order the cheapest thing on the menu, usually just a cup of coffee and a piece of toast, and sit in the back corner for as long as I could. Some days I stretched that one coffee for 3 hours, pretending to read the old newspaper someone had left behind. But the worst part wasn't the physical discomfort. Sure, my back ached from sleeping in the driver's seat, and my feet were always cold. I jumped at every strange sound outside the car, scared someone would realize I was sleeping there and call the police. But the hardest part was being invisible. People didn't see me anymore. One afternoon, I saw an old neighbor, Gloria, in the grocery store. She was just a few feet away in the bread aisle while I picked up another loaf and a jar of peanut butter. The only things I could really afford. We'd shared coffee and Christmas cookies for years. But she looked straight through me. As if I wasn't even there. And maybe I wasn't. Maybe once you cross that invisible line, once you're homeless, people stop seeing you. You become part of the background. Something uncomfortable they don't want to think about. I tried to keep my clothes clean by washing them in the diner sink, but they were wrinkled and smelled faintly of the car. My hair hung flat and greasy, and the circles under my eyes had gotten darker. I'd lost weight too, not from trying, but from eating crackers and peanut butter day after day. One day, I made a mistake. I drove past Henry's old house, my home, for no reason other than to see it again. I parked across the street, hoping maybe I'd catch a glimpse of Zoe or Miles playing outside. But instead I saw something that made me freeze. A huge dumpster sat in the driveway, overflowing with furniture. Henry's desk was in there. The same one he used to help the kids with homework every night. His recliner, where he'd fall asleep with Miles on his lap after watching Sunday movies. Even the bookshelf we filled together was being tossed out, still loaded with the books we used to read and talk about. Tessa stood next to the dumpster, wearing expensive workout clothes and holding her phone to her ear. She laughed at something, then turned to the movers and waved for them to toss out more. That's when I saw them carry out the small table Henry used during his last months. He couldn't manage the stairs anymore, so he set up that table by the window. Spent hours writing letters to the kids, organizing old family photos. And she just waved it away. I couldn't take it. I drove off before she saw me, But my hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over. I sat in an empty parking lot for what felt like forever, trying to stop the trembling. How could she erase him like that? Like he never mattered? Like none of it did? That night, I checked Facebook from the library. Just a quick check-in during the 1 hour they gave me on the public computer. And there it was. Tessa's latest post. A picture of the living room, completely redone. White, chrome, cold. Not a single sign Henry had ever lived there. Her caption said, "Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make room for the new." Feeling grateful for fresh starts and new beginnings. The comments made my stomach turn. People praising her strength, and saying how proud Henry would be. I clicked off the page. I couldn't read any more. That night I cried. Not the quiet, controlled crying I'd been doing for weeks. I mean full body shaking sobs that left my chest aching. I cried for Henry. For the grandchildren I might never see again. For the life I had lost. For the woman I used to be. But mostly, I cried because maybe, just maybe, Tessa had been right. Maybe I really didn't matter. Maybe I was just a helper. A babysitter. And now that Henry was gone, I was no longer needed. I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then I fell asleep with my cheek against the cold car window, dreaming of Henry as a little boy tugging on my apron, asking me to help him reach the cereal on the top shelf. That's when my phone rang. The screen was cracked and the battery low, but it buzzed loud enough to wake me up. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the display. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant bad news, bills, spam, or reminders that I couldn't fix anything. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Mercer?" the voice said. "This is Daniel Cho from Cho and Brooks Law. I was your son Henry's attorney. I've been trying to reach you for several days. We need to speak. It's important." I sat up fast, heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a moment I wasn't sure if I was still dreaming. My voice cracked as I answered, "Yes, this is Mara Mercer." "Mrs. Mercer," the man continued, "we need to meet in person today if possible. It's about your son Henry's estate." Estate? My hands began to shake. I gripped the phone tighter. I thought everything went to his wife. Tessa handles all that now. There was a pause. Then his voice lowered slightly. "There are some parts of the will that specifically involve you. And they were kept confidential. At your son's request. Could you come to my office this morning? I'm downtown, in the Wellington building on 4th Street. I looked at my reflection in the car mirror. My shirt was wrinkled. My face looked pale and tired. My hair hadn't been brushed properly in days. "I'm not in a good place right now," I admitted, embarrassed. "I don't really look presentable." "Come as you are," he said gently. "This can't wait." 3 hours later, I was sitting in the fanciest office I'd ever seen. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on pillows, and the receptionist gave me a warm smile even though I knew I looked like someone who hadn't had a real shower in days. I sat on a soft leather chair, hugging my coat close to my chest, trying to calm the nerves in my stomach. Daniel Cho walked in. He was in his 50s, glasses, kind eyes, dressed neatly in a blue suit. He offered me coffee, and I took it with both hands. It was the first hot drink I hadn't had to stretch out over hours. "Mrs. Mercer," he said as he sat down across from me, "before we begin, may I ask, what is your current living situation?" The question made my face burn. I looked down at the cup, then at my hands. "I'm between homes," I muttered. "Are you staying with friends or family?" "No. I'm in my car." I couldn't even look up. He didn't flinch. No judgment crossed his face. He just nodded slowly, kindly. "Henry told me this might happen," he said softly. He hoped it wouldn't. But he wanted to be prepared, just in case. Daniel reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it carefully and started flipping through the papers. Then he looked at me again. "Mrs. Mercer, your son came to me about 8 months ago. Right after his diagnosis. He made several changes to his will. And he made it very clear that those changes were to remain private until after his death." He cleared his throat, then began to read. "To my beloved mother Mara Mercer, who gave up so much for me and for my family, I leave the amount of $7 million to be held in trust by Cho and Brooks until she can secure stable housing and financial safety." I froze. The words didn't make sense. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Did you say $7 million? "Yes, ma'am." He gave a small smile. "Your son was much wealthier than most people knew. He'd made very smart investments, and his insurance policy was substantial. He wanted you to be safe." I covered my mouth with my hand, stunned. "But Tessa, she told me everything belonged to her now. She said I had nothing, no place, no rights, no." "What exactly did she say to you?" he asked carefully. And so I told him. I told him everything. How she made me leave. How she accused me of being a problem. How she said I was unhealthy for the kids. I told him about the furniture in the dumpster, the photos taken down, the way she looked through me like I never mattered. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just kept writing notes and nodding, his face turning more serious as I spoke. When I finished, he took a breath. "Henry expected this might happen," he said. "And there's more in the will you need to know." He flipped to another section. "If my wife, Tessa Mercer, removes my mother from the family home, or blocks her access to my children, full legal custody of Zoe Mercer and Miles Mercer shall pass immediately to Mara Mercer, with financial support included." I blinked. I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, custody?" Daniel nodded. "Henry filed the paperwork months ago. He submitted documentation of concerning behaviors he'd observed in Tessa. He also made several recordings during his last few weeks." He opened another folder. "These recordings include conversations where Tessa talked about sending you away and moving the children to California to be closer to her sister." "He recorded her?" I asked, shocked. "Yes. Under legal guidance. He wanted to make sure the children would be protected." Daniel reached into the folder again and pulled out a letter, neatly folded and sealed. "This is a personal letter from Henry to you. Would you like to read it yourself, or should I read it aloud?" My hands were shaking too badly to take the paper. "Please. Can you read it to me?" He nodded and opened the letter. "Mom, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't have the time or strength to warn you. I'm so sorry for that. I was afraid if I told you how I felt about Tessa, she'd keep you from the kids. But I've seen the way she treats you when no one is looking. I've heard her talking to her sister about getting rid of you after I'm gone. You're not a burden, Mom. You never were. You've always put our needs before your own, and I love you for that. This money I left you? It's not just an inheritance. It's a thank you. It's protection. It's everything I can do to make sure you can protect my children the way you always protected me. If she tries to stop you, don't let her. Fight back. You are the heart of this family. Zoe and Miles need you more than ever. I trust you, Mom. I always have. Love. Henry." I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears fell onto my hands. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were something else. Relief. Maybe even strength. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. "When can we move forward with the custody process?" I asked, my voice steadier than it had been since Henry died. Daniel smiled. "Today. But first, let's get you out of that car. Henry left specific funds for your immediate housing. We'll put you in a hotel for now, and my office will begin arranging everything else." I sat back, stunned. For 2 weeks, I'd been cold, scared, hungry, and forgotten. But Henry hadn't forgotten me. Even after death, he had protected me. He'd given me a second chance, not just to live, but to fight for the people we both loved most. 3 days later, I stood in front of the same house that Tessa had thrown me out of, but this time everything felt different. I wasn't just an old woman with nowhere to go anymore. I was standing there with legal documents in my purse, with a lawyer, a social worker, and even a police officer by my side. This was no longer her house to command. I was there because I had every right to be, and because Henry had made sure of it. The last few days had been a blur. Mr. Cho and his office took care of everything. They put me in a warm hotel with soft towels, hot showers, and clean clothes that actually fit. I got my hair trimmed and my nails cleaned. Nothing fancy, but for the first time in weeks, I looked like myself again. I felt like myself again. But what had changed the most wasn't my hair or my clothes. It was the way I stood. The way I breathed. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't begging for scraps or waiting to be seen. I had power now. And I had something worth fighting for. As we walked up the same pathway I had once walked with grocery bags and school projects, Mr. Cho leaned toward me and whispered, "Let me do most of the talking in the beginning. Tessa might react emotionally, and we want to stay calm." The police officer, a kind woman named Officer Reyes, glanced at the house. "I can see someone moving inside. Looks like she's home." I took a breath and rang the doorbell. That sound used to mean dinner was ready or the kids were home from soccer practice. Now it meant everything was about to change. Through the frosted glass, I saw Tessa's figure approaching. She probably thought it was a delivery or a friend. But the second she opened the door and saw me, and the people standing behind me, her face changed. First confusion. Then recognition. Then panic. "Mara? What is this?" she asked sharply. Why are there cops here? Are you in trouble or something?" Even now, she couldn't imagine that I wasn't the one with a problem. Before I could say anything, Mr. Cho stepped forward calmly. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm Daniel Cho, your late husband's attorney. We're here on official legal business concerning your children. May we come inside?" She hesitated, eyes darting from me to Officer Reyes to the social worker with a clipboard. "This doesn't make sense. Mara, what's going on?" Officer Reyes stepped up. "We're here to begin the process of a custody transfer. It's court-approved and legally binding. Can we come in, please?" Tessa looked like she might slam the door in our faces, but instead, she stepped back slowly, allowing us to enter. The living room had changed even more than in her Facebook pictures. It looked like a magazine now. White walls, chrome lamps, spotless shelves. Cold and perfect. Not a single photo of Henry. No toys, no books, no evidence that two children even lived here. The social worker looked around, then checked her clipboard. "Where are Zoe and Miles?" Tessa blinked. "At school. It's a school day." Then she looked at Mr. Cho. "What do you mean custody transfer? This is my home. My children. What is happening?" Mr. Cho pulled out the folder from his briefcase. "I'll explain everything, but I must inform you first that your husband, Henry Mercer, left a will with very specific instructions regarding his children and his mother." He began to read aloud the same words I had heard in his office. Tessa's mouth fell open. That's impossible. Henry never said anything about this. He would have told me." "We have documentation, Mrs. Mercer," Mr. Cho replied gently but firmly. "Including audio recordings. Would you like to hear them?" He pressed play on a small recorder. Henry's voice filled the room. Hearing him again nearly made my knees give out, but I stood tall. "Cleo, I need to know what your plans are for Mom after I'm gone," his voice said. Tessa's recorded voice replied, cold and casual, "We've talked about this. She's not my responsibility. She'll figure something out." The recording continued, and the words hit harder than any slap. She spoke about moving to California. About starting fresh. About sending me away so I wouldn't be a burden. Tessa stood frozen, listening to her own voice betray her. When it ended, she whispered, "How dare you? Come in here with all these people and try to take my kids away." "They're Henry's children too," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "And according to his will, they're now my responsibility." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just take them? You're homeless. You don't even have a job. What do you have?" Mr. Cho answered calmly, "Mrs. Mercer is now the beneficiary of a $7 million trust fund, left by her son. She has temporary housing, and permanent arrangements are in progress. She is fully capable of caring for Zoe and Miles." The words hit her like a brick. Her face drained of color. $7 million? No. The life insurance was only $2. I already got that. Henry had other investments, Mr. Cho explained, which he chose to leave to his mother and his children. Not to you. Tessa's jaw clenched. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an escape route. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "I was their mother. I did everything." "Did you?" I asked quietly. When Zoe woke up crying from nightmares about Henry, who held her? When Miles asked about his dad's bedtime stories, who listened? You were busy painting walls and posting about fresh starts. She couldn't speak. The social worker stepped forward. "Mrs. Mercer, We'll be picking the children up from school this afternoon. Do you have their belongings ready? Tessa turned slowly, looking at the spotless house. Their clothes are upstairs, but most of their toys are in storage. I got rid of a lot of things. I thought it would help them move on. You got rid of their toys? I said, my voice breaking. The ones Henry picked out? You threw away their father and their childhood. I was trying to help, she said, but even she didn't believe it. The social worker nodded. We'll come back with the children at 3:15. Mrs. Mercer, she looked at me, has housing secured and legal custody granted. Everything is in place. As we began to leave, Tessa suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. Please, she whispered. You don't understand. They need routine. I can give them that. I gently pulled my arm away. You had your chance, Tessa. And you chose new furniture over your own children's hearts. She didn't speak again as we walked out. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just leaving someone else's house. I was going to bring Zoe and Miles home. At exactly 3:15, we arrived at the school to pick up Zoe and Miles. I stood near the entrance with the social worker, heart pounding, hand shaking slightly even though I tried to appear calm. I hadn't seen the children since the day I left the house. I didn't even know what they'd been told about why I was gone. I was scared. Scared they'd be confused, or angry, or worse, distant. The first bell rang. Moments later, Zoe stepped out of her classroom, holding her backpack, looking around for her mom like she always did. Her eyes swept past us, then came back slowly. She froze when she saw me. Her little face tightened, and she whispered so softly that I almost didn't hear her. Are you real? Or am I dreaming again? I bent down to her level, not caring that other parents and teachers were watching. My voice shook as I said, I'm real, sweetheart. I'm here. And I've come to take you and your brother home. She blinked, her lower lip trembling. But Mommy said you left because you didn't want to live with us anymore. My throat ached. I felt the social worker's gentle hand on my shoulder, probably reminding me to stay careful with my words. But I couldn't lie, not to Zoe. Your mommy was wrong, sweet girl. I never wanted to leave. I love you and Miles more than anything. Just then, Miles came out of the hallway. He was trying to act cool, walking slowly, but the second he saw me, his whole face changed. For a second he lit up. Then he stopped. His shoulders dropped and he looked down at his shoes. Mom said you were mad at us, he mumbled. She said that's why you left without saying goodbye. My heart broke. I sat right down on the floor of that hallway, pulling both of them close. No. Never. I didn't leave because I was mad. I left because your mom asked me to. And I thought I had to do what she said. But you're our grandma, Zoe whispered. Grandmas aren't supposed to leave. You're absolutely right, I said, hugging her tighter. And I'm never leaving again. The social worker crouched beside us. Children, she said gently, your grandmother will be taking care of you from now on. She has a nice place for you to stay. Everything's been arranged. Miles looked up quickly. We don't have to live with Mom anymore? The way he said it, quietly but with hope, told me more than any words ever could. These children had been hurting too. Not just grieving their father, but confused, lost, living in a cold, empty house that didn't feel like home. You'll still see your mom sometimes, I said carefully. But you'll live with me now. We're going to have our own home, with room for all your memories. And your toys. And your feelings. Can I have pictures of Daddy in my room? Zoe asked, eyes wide. Mommy put them all away. She said they made her too sad. You can have as many pictures as you want, I smiled. We'll make a whole wall of Daddy pictures if that's what makes you happy. Miles narrowed his eyes a little. But Mom said you didn't have any money. That's why you had to leave. How can you take care of us now? I smiled at him, remembering the way Daniel Cho had explained everything to me. Your daddy made sure I'd have everything I needed. He was very smart. And he loved you so much. He made a plan to take care of all of us. He left you money? Zoe asked, surprised. I nodded. He left me something even more important than money. He left me a job, the most special job in the world. Taking care of you too. The drive to our temporary home was quiet. Zoe and Miles sat in the back seat, whispering now and then, peeking out the windows. They were trying to understand everything. Trying to believe that this was real. Our new place wasn't big or fancy. It was a clean, furnished 3-bedroom apartment Mr. Cho's office had arranged for us. Nothing over the top, but it felt warm. It felt safe. "This is your room, Zoe," I said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. I had already placed a few of her favorite things in there. Some books, a butterfly-shaped nightlight I'd managed to save, and a few stuffed animals. She ran inside and touched each item like she was afraid it would disappear. Her eyes lit up. "And this one's yours, Miles," I told him, pointing to the room across the hall. He walked in slowly, looking at the twin bed, the small desk, and the bookshelf. He didn't say anything at first. Then he turned and said, "It's smaller than my room at Mom's." I nodded. "That's true. Is that okay?" He looked around again. "Yeah. It feels warmer. Like someone who loves me picked it out." That night, we sat on the living room floor and ate pizza straight from the box. Something Tessa never allowed. We didn't use plates. We didn't worry about crumbs. We just laughed and talked. I told them stories about their father when he was their age. "Daddy really put peanut butter in his hair?" Zoe giggled. "He was convinced it would make it grow faster," I laughed. "He wanted to look like his favorite baseball player." Miles leaned in. "What did Grandpa do?" "Oh, your grandpa spent 2 hours washing it out with dish soap and then told Henry he should probably just practice hitting and catching instead." They laughed until they hiccuped. Later, I noticed little things that broke my heart. Zoe started cleaning up the pizza boxes without being asked, like she was afraid of getting in trouble. Miles kept glancing at the clock and asking if it was bedtime yet, like he didn't want to be caught staying up too late. "Zoe, sweetheart," I said softly. "You don't have to clean up right now. We can do it together later." "But Mommy says if we don't clean right away, it makes extra work for other people." I smiled, holding back tears. "Your mom was right that it's good to be helpful. But here in our home, we don't have to worry about being perfect all the time. It's okay to just enjoy being together." That night, after I tucked them into bed, I sat in the living room and called Mr. Cho to give him an update. "How are they adjusting?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said. "But I can see it. They've been walking on eggshells for months. They're scared to mess up. Scared to feel too much. Scared to be kids." "That's not unusual," he said gently. "But with love and time, they'll remember how to be children again." As I hung up the phone, I looked around our little home. The quiet felt peaceful, not lonely. The children were safe, warm, and close. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next few weeks moved slowly, but something beautiful was happening. I was watching Zoe and Miles come back to life. Zoe started lining up her stuffed animals for tea parties again, pouring invisible tea into tiny plastic cups. Her room, once so neat and cold in Tessa's house, became a little messy in the best way. Books on the bed, drawings taped to the wall, socks never in pairs. Miles stopped asking if it was bedtime every hour. He started leaving his baseball glove on the kitchen counter, spreading his homework across the dining table. It felt like they were finally breathing again. And then came the questions. Real questions. Not the ones they whispered nervously to each other in the back seat, but the ones they asked me directly, while I folded laundry or made grilled cheese. "Grandma, what was Daddy like when he was little? Did he ever get in trouble at school? What was his favorite color?" I pulled out old photo albums and videos on my phone. We watched clips of Henry teaching them how to ride bikes, flipping pancakes, building snowmen. They laughed and cried at the same time. They were remembering, not the perfect version of their dad that Tessa had tried to preserve, but the real man. Their father. One evening, while we were looking through photos, Miles pointed to one where Henry was standing on a chair, clearly startled. "What's that one?" he asked. "Oh," I chuckled. That was the day he found a spider in the bathroom. He was terrified. "Dad? Scared of spiders?" Miles laughed. "Terrified," I nodded. I had to catch it in a cup while he stood on the sink with a broom. He also hated thunderstorms and used to sleep with a flashlight under his pillow. Zoe frowned. But Daddy was so brave. He was. But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you still do what you need to, even when you are scared. That night, I went to bed with a heart full of emotion. Henry wasn't being forgotten. His children were beginning to remember him fully, with all his strengths, quirks, and silly fears. And I was helping them carry him forward, not just as a memory, but as part of who they were. But the moment that changed everything came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I was making lunch in the kitchen, grilled cheese again, their favorite, when Zoe walked in quietly. She stood there for a moment, watching me, then asked, "Grandma, are you sad because of Daddy?" I turned from the stove and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I miss him very much." She stepped closer. "Mommy said I shouldn't cry about Daddy. She said it makes other people sad too." I knelt down and held her face in my hands. "Oh, baby. It's okay to cry. Crying doesn't hurt me. It makes me proud that you love your daddy so much." She looked at me, her eyes filling. "Can I cry with you sometimes?" "Always," I whispered. "We can cry together. And laugh together. And talk about him whenever you want." She crawled into my lap and held me tightly. A few minutes later, Miles joined us, sitting beside us on the floor with his head against my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, letting the tears come, letting the memories in. That was the first time since Henry's funeral that I saw them truly let go. Not in fear but in safety. They weren't afraid of their feelings anymore. They were allowed to feel sad, angry, lost, and still be okay. And in that moment, I realized something important. Henry hadn't just saved me with money or legal documents. He had saved me by giving me purpose. By giving me the chance to show his children what real love looked like. Love that stayed, love that listened, love that didn't need things to be perfect. 6 months passed, and everything felt different. We had moved into a small but cozy house with a backyard. Nothing big. Nothing flashy. But it was ours. Zoe had space to do cartwheels in the grass. Miles could throw his baseball against the fence and shout when he missed a catch without worrying about disturbing the peace. Upstairs, Zoe was blasting music while organizing her rock collection. Miles was on the living room floor, books and homework spread everywhere, occasionally shouting, "Grandma, what's 9 times 12? This was the kind of life Henry wanted for his kids. Not the perfectly clean, emotionless world Tessa created, but a home full of noise, love, and little messes. A place where they could be exactly who they were. And just when I was starting to feel like we'd made it, like we'd truly begun our new life, there was a knock at the door. Through the window, I saw her. Tessa. She stood on the porch holding a small gift bag. Her hair was tied back. She wasn't wearing expensive clothes. She looked unsure, nervous, softer. I opened the door slowly. "Hello, Tessa." She gave me a weak smile. I was hoping I could see the children for a few minutes. "It's not your scheduled visitation day," I said carefully. "I know," she said. I brought Zoe something for her birthday next week. And I thought maybe we could talk." I studied her face. The woman standing in front of me didn't look like the one who kicked me out with a smile. She looked tired. "Real. They're doing homework," I said. "But you can come in for a few minutes." She stepped inside, glancing around at the drawings on the fridge, the scattered toys, the half-folded laundry on the couch. Miles looked up from his math. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. How's school?" "Good. I made the honor roll again." She smiled, but it was small. "That's wonderful, Miles. Your father would be so proud." Her voice was different. Less polished. More honest. I called upstairs. "Zoe, your mother's here." Zoe came halfway down the stairs. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were worn. There was a smudge of paint on her cheek. She looked like a happy, normal 9-year-old. "Hi, Mommy. I brought you something for your birthday," Tessa said, handing her the gift bag. Zoe looked at me. I nodded. She took it and opened it carefully. Inside was a small silver locket. Nothing expensive. Just simple. Inside there was a picture of Henry. I thought, "You might like to wear it sometimes," Tessa said. Zoe smiled. "Thank you, Mommy. It's really pretty. Want me to help you put it on?" Zoe nodded. They stood there together for a few moments as Tessa fastened the chain. It was the first natural, gentle moment I'd seen between them in over a year. When Zoe went back upstairs and Miles returned to his homework, I stood in the kitchen with Tessa. The air between us was heavy with unspoken things. "They look happy," she said quietly. "They are. And they're allowed to be sad too. That matters." She looked down. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, Mara. For how I treated you after Henry died. For what I said." I leaned on the counter. "What changed?" "Losing them," she whispered. "Losing the kids. Made me realize I was already losing them long before. I was trying to control everything. And it made me miss what they needed most. Henry was right. I wasn't ready." I stared at her for a long moment. This wasn't a full apology. And she wasn't completely changed. But it was a start. "They still need their mother," I said gently. "Just not the one you were trying to be. They need you to be honest. To be soft sometimes. To be human." "I don't know how," she whispered. "You can learn. Just like they're learning how to be okay again." She nodded. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear. "You're a good grandmother, Mara. Better than I gave you credit for." I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. We both knew it was true. Tessa stood at the door, holding onto the frame like she wasn't sure if she should leave yet. "Mara," she said quietly, "Zoe's birthday is next week. I was wondering if I could take both of them out for ice cream. Just the three of us. Would that be okay?" I looked at her carefully. 6 months ago, I would have said no without thinking. Back then, I didn't trust her with anything, especially not the kids. But the woman standing in front of me now wasn't the same person who threw away Henry's belongings like trash. She wasn't the same cold voice that told me to pack my things and disappear. She looked tired. Humbled. Real. "Just 1 hour," I said. "And they'll call me when you pick them up and when you drop them off." "Of course," she nodded, as if she was surprised I said yes. After she left, Miles peeked his head up from his math book. "Grandma Mara, do you think Mom is getting better?" It was such a simple question, but it made my heart ache. He asked it the way a child asks about a sick pet or a broken toy. Careful, unsure, hoping. "I think she's trying," I said honestly. "What do you think?" He looked thoughtful. She seemed sadder. But nicer. Like maybe she misses Dad the way we do now. I nodded. Maybe she does. It takes some people a long time to figure out how to show their feelings. But she's learning. Like you are. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and looked up at the stars. Just 6 months ago, I had been sleeping in my car, feeling invisible. Useless. Unwanted. That night, I was tucking in 2 growing children, filling a house with love and laughter, and waking up every day knowing I mattered. Henry had given me so much more than money. He'd given me a purpose. A second chance. Not just to live but to lead. The next morning, Zoe found me in the kitchen flipping pancakes. "Are those Daddy's pancakes?" she asked, climbing onto the stool by the counter. "They are," I smiled. "Extra vanilla, just the way he used to make them." She rested her head in her hands. "I had a dream about Daddy last night." "Was it a good dream?" She nodded. "He was making pancakes too. He said he was happy you were taking care of us." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't hide them. Zoe knew now, it was okay to cry. "I'm happy to take care of you, sweetheart," I said. "It's the best job I've ever had." A few minutes later, Miles stumbled in, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. "Are those Dad's pancakes?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "They sure are. With extra vanilla and a pinch of cinnamon. No measuring spoons, just how he liked it." The 3 of us sat at the table, syrup dripping onto plates, orange juice sloshing in plastic cups, and laughter filling the room. It was messy. It was loud. It was real. And it was everything Henry wanted for them. Later that day, while Zoe was coloring and Miles was building a tower out of blocks and books, I opened the drawer in my bedroom. Inside was the letter Mr. Cho had given me. The last letter Henry wrote. I'd read it many times before, but I needed to see his words again. "You are not a burden, Mom. You never were. You are the heart of this family. I need you to remember that when things feel heavy. Take care of Zoe and Miles the way you took care of me. with patience, humor, and love. They'll need you to be strong. But they'll also need you to be human. Thank you for everything you gave up for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you. I held the letter to my chest, tears sliding down my cheeks. Henry had trusted me. He had seen me when I couldn't even see myself. He knew what the kids would need. And he knew I'd be the one to give it to them. Not just shelter or meals, but love that didn't disappear when things got hard. Outside, I could hear the soft noise of weekend life. Lawnmowers. Laughter. Distant music from another yard. For the first time in a long time, we were part of that world again. We belonged. That night, I tucked Zoe into bed. She looked up at me with those serious brown eyes, so much like Henry's when he was young. "Grandma," she asked, "are you ever going to leave us again?" "Never," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "I'll be here until you're all grown up and don't need me anymore." She smiled. "And after that?" I grinned. "Then I'll be the grandma who spoils your kids rotten and tells them embarrassing stories about how their parents used to eat dirt and put peanut butter in their hair." Zoe giggled. "James ate dirt all the time. Your dad did too. It runs in the family," I said, tucking the blanket under her chin. As I turned off the light and walked toward my own room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like the woman who packed her things in the middle of the night with nowhere to go. I looked stronger. Softer. Whole. Henry had saved his children from silence. And he had saved me from being forgotten. He reminded me, and all of us, that love doesn't stop when someone is gone. It just changes form. Sometimes, it becomes pancakes with extra vanilla. Sometimes, it's sitting on the floor while your grandchild cries. Sometimes, it's just staying. The weeks that followed felt like a fresh start, not just for Zoe and Miles, but for me too. Our new home wasn't perfect, but it was alive. There were socks on the floor, half-colored drawings taped to the fridge, toy cars under the couch, and a constant trail of peanut butter fingerprints on the hallway walls. But I never asked them to stop being messy. I never asked them to be quiet. This house wasn't built to be admired. It was built to be lived in. Zoe started humming while she drew. Miles started singing in the shower, even though he was terribly off-key. I learned every line of their new favorite cartoon because we watched it a dozen times a week. I also learned the names of every child in Zoe's class, because she told me about them in great detail. Every single day. One rainy afternoon, as I folded laundry, I heard the two of them giggling in the living room. When I peeked in, they were building a blanket fort between the couch and the dining table. Exactly how Henry used to do it. "Do you remember how Daddy made his forts?" Zoe asked, placing pillows on top. "He used to make tunnels," Miles added, crawling under. "Let's do tunnels too." They didn't cry while they said it. They didn't freeze up or get quiet. They were remembering, and they were smiling. That was the moment I knew they were healing. Not completely. Not all at once. But they were beginning to carry Henry's memory like a soft blanket instead of a heavy stone. One evening after dinner, I was sitting on the porch sipping tea when Zoe joined me with a book in her hands. She didn't say anything for a while, just sat beside me with her knees pulled up under her chin. Then she whispered, "Grandma, did Daddy ever cry?" I looked at her surprised. "Of course he did, sweetheart. Everyone cries sometimes. But he always looked so strong. He always knew what to do." "Being strong doesn't mean you never cry," I said. "It means you let yourself feel things, and then you keep going." She nodded, like she was letting that sink in. "Mommy still cries sometimes," she said after a pause. "That's okay," I said. "Crying is a way our hearts speak when words aren't enough." Zoe leaned her head on my arm. "Sometimes I cry at night. But I don't want to make anyone sad." "Oh, baby. Your tears don't make me sad," I told her. "They remind me how deeply you loved your dad. And that love is something beautiful. Never be ashamed of it." She didn't say anything else, but she stayed beside me until the sun dipped low and the porch lights clicked on. The next Saturday, it was time for Zoe's birthday. I made her pancakes with extra whipped cream. Miles helped decorate the kitchen with balloons we picked up from the dollar store. And in the afternoon, Tessa arrived for her supervised visit, just like we'd agreed. She was different again. Less makeup. A soft sweater instead of a designer jacket. She brought a small cake and 2 birthday cards. One for Zoe. One for Miles, just because she didn't want him to feel left out. Zoe hugged her without hesitation. Miles was a little slower, but he didn't pull away. They spent an hour together, playing a board game and talking about school. When the time came for her to leave, Tessa looked at me with something almost like gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be here." I just nodded. They deserve the chance to know all of you, not just the parts you used to show. After she left, Miles came up to me while I washed dishes. "Grandma," he asked, "do you think Mom will ever be like she was before Daddy got sick?" I dried my hands and turned to him. "I think she's trying. But it's not about being who she used to be. It's about becoming who she's supposed to be now." He nodded slowly. "I kinda hope she gets there. But I'm glad we're here with you." I hugged him, my heart full and aching all at once. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." That night, I tucked them both into bed and sat quietly in the living room with one of Henry's old books. The house was still a little messy. The sink had birthday cake crumbs. Someone had left a sock on the lamp. But I didn't feel tired or overwhelmed. I felt peaceful. Henry had given me this chance. Not just to protect his children, but to teach them that love isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about being the one who stays. It's about making pancakes that are a little too sweet and still perfect. It's about listening to dreams and wiping away tears and reminding two kids that even when everything else falls apart, someone is there who loves them with her whole heart. 6 months ago, I was invisible, sleeping in a car, wondering if my life had any meaning left. Now I was their safe place. Their home. Their reminder that they mattered. That their memories mattered. And in giving them that, I had found myself again too. As I turned off the lights that night and peeked into their rooms one last time, I whispered quietly to Henry, wherever he was, "They're okay, my boy. And so am I." A full year passed since Henry's death. And somehow, even though the pain of losing him still lived inside us, we had learned how to carry it with gentleness instead of fear. The children were growing. Zoe was now in 4th grade and had joined the school choir. Miles was playing baseball and had made new friends in the neighborhood. They smiled more easily now. They didn't flinch when someone mentioned their father's name. They didn't walk on eggshells anymore. Our home had become a place of healing. Photos of Henry hung on the hallway wall, mixed in with school drawings, silly selfies, and sticky notes with quotes like, "It's okay to miss someone and still be happy." One Saturday afternoon, Zoe asked if we could visit the park where Henry used to take them. "He always let us climb the rocks," she said, holding on to her locket. "Mom never liked it. But Daddy always said we were stronger than we thought." We packed a lunch and drove there together. The park was quiet, the trees rustling in a soft breeze. I watched Zoe and Miles climb up the rocks, laughing, challenging each other like old times. They looked so free. So light. Tessa met us there. Not as a surprise. She had called ahead this time. And this time, I didn't tense up when I saw her. She brought flowers. Not for Henry's grave. Just for Zoe and Miles. "For the strongest kids I know," she said, handing the little bouquet to Zoe. "Your dad would be so proud of how brave you both are." Zoe smiled. "We learned from Grandma," Miles added, "and from Daddy. He taught us how to love." Tessa nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. Later, as we all sat under a tree eating sandwiches, the kids ran ahead, chasing butterflies. I looked over at Tessa. She was staring at them with a soft expression, one I hadn't seen in years. "They're happy," she whispered. "They are," I said. She looked at me, voice low. "Thank you, Mara, for not giving up on them. Or me." I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, there had been moments I wanted to give up. Moments I thought I couldn't take another step. But Henry's voice had always echoed in my heart. "They'll need you to be strong. But also human." I looked at her and said, "We all get lost, Tessa. What matters is who helps us find our way back." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I believed her growth wasn't temporary. She had changed. And while she might never be the perfect mother, she didn't need to be. None of us did. Back home that night, the kids wrote thank you cards for a school project. Zoe handed me hers shyly before bed. "I know we were supposed to write to a teacher, but I wrote to you instead." I opened the card. Inside, in her careful handwriting, it read, Thank you for coming back for us. Thank you for not letting go. Thank you for being our home. Grandma. You saved our hearts. I held the card in my lap long after Zoe had gone to sleep. The tears that came were soft and full of peace. That night, I went out to the porch and looked up at the stars. I did it, Henry, I whispered. They're okay. We're okay. And in the stillness, I felt him there. Not in a ghostly way, but in a way that felt like warmth in my chest. Like the echo of his laughter in Miles' voice. Like the curve of his smile in Zoe's grin. Grief doesn't disappear. But love doesn't either. Love stays. In pancakes. In stories. In bedtime hugs and scraped knees and quiet forgiveness. Love stays in the people who keep showing up. That's what I had learned. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to be rich or strong all the time. I just needed to stay. And in staying, I became everything they needed. Not because I knew all the answers, but because I loved them too much to leave. A full year passed since Henry's death. And somehow, even though the pain of losing him still lived inside us, we had learned how to carry it with gentleness instead of fear. The children were growing. Zoe was now in 4th grade and had joined the school choir. Miles was playing baseball and had made new friends in the neighborhood. They smiled more easily now. They didn't flinch when someone mentioned their father's name. They didn't walk on eggshells anymore. Our home had become a place of healing. Photos of Henry hung on the hallway wall, mixed in with school drawings, silly selfies, and sticky notes with quotes like, "It's okay to miss someone and still be happy." One Saturday afternoon, Zoe asked if we could visit the park where Henry used to take them. "He always let us climb the rocks," she said, holding on to her locket. "Mom never liked it. But Daddy always said we were stronger than we thought." We packed a lunch and drove there together. The park was quiet, the trees rustling in a soft breeze. I watched Zoe and Miles climb up the rocks, laughing, challenging each other like old times. They looked so free. So light. Tessa met us there. Not as a surprise. She had called ahead this time. And this time, I didn't tense up when I saw her. She brought flowers. Not for Henry's grave. Just for Zoe and Miles. "For the strongest kids I know," she said, handing the little bouquet to Zoe. "Your dad would be so proud of how brave you both are." Zoe smiled. "We learned from Grandma," Miles added. "And from Daddy. He taught us how to love." Tessa nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. Later, as we all sat under a tree eating sandwiches, the kids ran ahead, chasing butterflies. I looked over at Tessa. She was staring at them with a soft expression. One I hadn't seen in years. "They're happy," she whispered. "They are," I said. She looked at me, voice low. "Thank you, Mara. For not giving up on them. Or me." I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, there had been moments I wanted to give up. Moments I thought I couldn't take another step. But Henry's voice had always echoed in my heart. "They'll need you to be strong. But also human." I looked at her and said, "We all get lost, Tessa. What matters is who helps us find our way back." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I believed her growth wasn't temporary. She had changed. And while she might never be the perfect mother, she didn't need to be. None of us did. Back home that night, the kids wrote thank you cards for a school project. Zoe handed me hers shyly before bed. "I know we were supposed to write to a teacher, but I wrote to you instead." I opened the card. Inside, in her careful handwriting, it read, "Thank you for coming back for us. Thank you for not letting go. Thank you for being our home. Grandma. You saved our hearts." I held the card in my lap long after Zoe had gone to sleep. The tears that came were soft and full of peace. That night, I went out to the porch and looked up at the stars. "I did it, Henry," I whispered. "They're okay. We're okay." And in the stillness, I felt him there. Not in a ghostly way, but in a way that felt like warmth in my chest. Like the echo of his laughter in Miles' voice. Like the curve of his smile in Zoe's grin. Grief doesn't disappear. But love doesn't either. Love stays. In pancakes. In stories. In bedtime hugs and scraped knees and quiet forgiveness. Love stays in the people who keep showing up. That's what I had learned. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to be rich or strong all the time. I just needed to stay. And in staying, I became everything they needed. Not because I knew all the answers, but because I loved them too much to leave.